With 2025 has come a huge amount of risk. Equally, opportunity, but I don't think much opportunity was realized. And I think in 2026, we're going to see the outcomes of the lack of that thinking in the problems that have been generated. So we're going to move from the idea of AI being fantastic to the reality of AI delivering. That will create a shift, that will create a big change. I think that moves us from a mass infrastructure world into a private, real-time, controlled world. We've seen studies where AI has completely replaced human beings, and you begin to see a decline in customer happiness. You see a drop-off. Yes, you get that immediate saving, but over a period of time, hence 2026 is more about action, consideration, foresight.
Graeme Scott, welcome to GAEA Talks.
Good to be here, weirdly.
Now, you're normally in this chair, right?
Yeah.
But this is a special episode about AI within business and enterprise, and specifically adoption and what likely 2026 and beyond holds, really. And we thought, who better to ask than you? You've interviewed some amazing guests on the podcast, some of the world's leading AI innovators, plus the work you're doing with your own AI business. As I said, I thought who best to ask. So before we get into that, the audience might not know you so much about your background, really, because you have a fascinating, diverse background, a background in music, film, and technology. How do they come together? How has that come about? And now you're leading an AI tech firm and an amazing podcast.
I see music, the moving image, technology, understanding people is all the same thing. Technology to me is problem solving. Actually producing music is problem solving. It's storytelling, making films, having the opportunity to be around incredible people. I mean, the last film, Beyond the Beach, The Hell and the Hope, I was privileged to spend time with doctors, surgeons, organizational staff in war zones across the world. I think to experience things firsthand is very important. To assemble a documentary is really understanding the art of storytelling. Who's your audience? What problem are you trying to solve? What are you trying to communicate? And how do you understand the human emotional element? So to me, all of these things are very, very much interconnected. And with GAEA Talks podcast, it's an incredible privilege to spend time with people from all walks of life, but thought leaders, leaders of industry, incredibly smart people such as the professors, and to get the insight, to be able to connect the dots and really see different perspectives, which I wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity, and in many ways the audience wouldn't either. So as I said, it's all very much connected.
Okay, interesting. So let's get into the main podcast. As I said, this is about AI adoption for business and enterprise, specifically looking now at 2026, really. If we just backtrack to 2025, so I think a lot of C-suite leaders have been focused on, if you like, wave one of AI adoption, really. So shaving 10% efficiency off here, or automating the likes of emails, really. But from your vantage point, how do you see that evolving in 2026 beyond just that narrow aspect of AI, and really seeing AI transform business, really? How do you see that in 26?
I think it's going to be an incredibly important year. If you consider what 2025 was, It was the introduction in the business and enterprise world of AI. It was the toe in the water. We had a lot of proof of concepts. We had a lot of education, and anyone who's taken a company to market, especially if you're taking a company to market in a new sector or a new wave of technology, with that, and I think the very large players, the ones who have really pushed the LLMs, for example, have had to bear the burden and the cost of educating the marketplace. Of course, they're selling a particular type of AI, and AI goes back way beyond 2025. So people were able to experiment. It was fantastic that so many proof of concepts happened, and people began to think about how they could use AI. The obvious solutions come up first, and efficiencies. I mean, it's a basic one. There's limited scope, but also the education goes to the other side. And I think in 2026, we're going to begin to see the other side of what happened in 2025, the other side of that education. With practice and with doing things comes experience. And I think experience was very much overlooked. In many cases, it wasn't even on the table. Now, as we begin to see the net result of experience, and we begin to see the education rise, that leads itself to understand what could be done, what problems could be solved, and how could we solve them? What other types of AI are there, and where's the value? The value in subject matter expertise. Just because AI appeared doesn't mean decades worth of experience went out the window. In many ways, the lazy thinking in the first instance was that one can replace the other. I don't believe that's the case. And I think what we're going to see in 2026 is people structuring organizations to really understand, how do we do things properly? How do we leverage the assets that they have? People with experience. How do they leverage the existing infrastructure, which is there because it's about having decent uptime. It's about customer service. It's about reliability. It's about security. With 2025 has come a huge amount of risk. Equally, opportunity, but I don't think much opportunity was realized. And I think when people begin to see what the costs are by using that initial method, I think they're going to get quite scared off. But the key is that education will lead to a way of thinking, to discovery, to listening to the human subject matter expertise, to realize actually the opportunity can be leveraged and can be cost efficient and can complement human needs. And ultimately, every business is there to be successful, ideally on a sustainable basis. So we're going to see from the idea of let's explore to let's act.
There was that in 25, there was that well publicized report, wasn't it? 95% of proof of concepts within businesses were failing, really. I'm not quite sure the purpose of that report personally, because surely the point of a proof of concept is you fail quick and you find things out, really. Do you think that, do you think businesses have learned from those proof of concepts, and are you seeing many develop into really innovative ways of doing business?
Well, I think that's a very interesting report. But when we talk about what have they learned about proof of concepts, the most important learning is what was the point and purpose.
Yeah.
Because many of those proof of concepts were based on, here's a great technology, how can we make this work? When that probably shouldn't have been the question. The question should have been, what are we trying to achieve with our business? Where are our existing weaknesses, and where can we build upon our strengths? And then educate to understand what type of AI could contribute to creating a proof of concept to solve the business problems that matter. Just because you say AI does not necessarily mean anything. So it's quite inevitable that the majority of the proof of concepts in the first instance, and you also have to look at upon which metrics are they measured, because a lot of really good AI or proof of concepts that could work could be incremental gains. It could be small amounts of margin, and it's about understanding across time and space, do we have the same demand at Christmas as February? So if you did your proof of concept at a particular time of year, is that representative of the overall gains? Also, how can you look at your organization? How can you engage the various stakeholders that you have and say, well, what are your problems? How can we help you perform your function better? And if you take that approach, then a centralized AI budget distributed out across business functions could absolutely increase the level of communication. It could be byproducts of solving non-direct problems that could assist with each business unit actually having much better outcomes, and ensuring that you understand outcomes based on the business problem, which is why you would do a proof of concept. I think there's a lot of proof of concepts that weren't thought out.
So are you saying that businesses need to get better, or they already are getting better at defining what those outcomes are?
In effect, I mean, any business should really understand what are they trying to achieve. Of course, when you say a business or an enterprise, that's usually from the top level down and the bottom level up. It's made up of lots of different functions, and understanding the particular functions, for example, risk and resilience, should be about supporting the rest of the business units to avoid any disruption and to enable them to operate at full capacity at all times where appropriate. Depending on the industry that you're in and the location that you're in, there are probably variabilities. So in many ways, using AI to address scale in order to make confident decisions at a business unit level. And then of course, even if you look down across a business unit, there are lots of individual functions. How can you increase the output and leverage the expertise that you already have in the business? I think there's just a very different way of looking at it, which, to be honest, is the way of thinking about successful businesses. The fact it's AI, and again, it goes back to how has the majority of AI been sold? It's been sold on efficiency. It's get it in there, it can write emails quicker, it can do a lot of things quicker on a plausible level. So it's almost like a nice gadget, but is it sustainable? Is it really solving the problem, or is it creating problems? And I think in 2026, we're probably going to see two things. We're going to see the outcomes of the lack of that thinking in the problems that have been generated. I mean, we can think of one large operating system company that has implemented AI at an OS level and is now seeing a massive uptick in people regressing their operating system to an unsupported version. Some large corporate saying, we just don't want this. This is not working. So getting rid of their hardware and moving to Apple. That's a consequence because it's not working. It doesn't work for the business. So what does work and why? And it's also looking at your negotiables and non-negotiables. Security, data sovereignty, trust and truth, reliability. These should all be non-negotiables. But I think the key was people didn't realize those non-negotiables were on the table. But the problem is in business, especially enterprise, if you lose trust, you can lose the underpinnings to the environment in which your business operates. And of course, there would be negative consequences coming, but you can't blame that necessarily all on one phrase. That was a business decision, and it was a lack of foresight, a lack of understanding the consequence. And usually it's because one or two companies stand to earn a lot of money if they can convince everyone.
Do you think there's an element of fear of missing out within implementing those things as well?
Absolutely, as well.
Mm.
I mean, the way the world has been structured,
Yeah.
and the way that the world is being structured with sales of technology within enterprises, it is very much leaned towards in 2025 making sure people sell what they're selling and encouraging people to buy what they're selling, not necessarily to deliver technology which solves business problems. If you have a business problem and technology can facilitate better outcomes, that's usually a logical transaction. But you can't just discard massive amounts of infrastructure and say, scrap all of that,
Yeah.
go with this. Even from a basic security level, it doesn't make any sense. But yeah, the fear of missing out has probably led to a lot of conclusions or a lot of actions which I think people are backtracking from very rapidly.
Okay, you mentioned trust and truth there. I've heard you mention trust and truth a lot on the podcast and also in the context of GAEA AI, your business, really. So, why? I guess what the question is, in an era where black box technology and can hallucinate and create grey IT risks, why is it so important to organizations that they can dig into those the decisions that the AI makes, really? Why is that so important?
Well, I heard one of our guests say that there really should be someone in charge of, in any organization, of like a chief AI officer
Mm.
to literally liaise with the other departments and divisions. Now, if we look at, for example, a bank, a highly regulated industry, and if a bank didn't really have full control over their customers' data, if the figures were probably right and it's probabilistic rather than empirical, and your bank balance could feels like it's around this, that can't work. I mean, insurance is another one where they're highly regulated. Regulated industries require empirical fact. When you put things through a transformer and you put the data predominantly into the AI, and a transformer, a lot of the audience will know what it is. Some may not. So from the business perspective, that's the black box technology. And whilst it can have incredible utility, the fundamental way that it works is something goes in, something comes out. Probabilistically on the other side, it may be very plausible, but it's liable to hallucination. You don't really know why it's come to a conclusion. And same as the law, you must be able to justify and understand how decisions were made. And if you abscond from your responsibility to do that, and you create a layer where there's no transparency, then there's a huge amounts of things that could go wrong. And the bigger the system, the more complex the system, you can't root out problems if you can't see them. You can't find the real true efficiencies if they're not visible. And there has to be accountability. So there are ways with AI, multiple different forms of AI, to actually solve those problems. There's the idea that you can protect your data. Even from a legal perspective, British data probably should be domiciled in the United Kingdom. In the US, of course, data in the US should be domiciled in the US, data sovereignty. The idea that you just pour all of your information, potentially with other customers' information, who then have their customers' information in there, is very dangerous. The idea that even if you have your own data on your own servers, if using that method, the cost is probably quite astronomical, and you've given up the idea of trust and truth because you're only dealing with probability. That in its simple self is a monumental problem, and I think the majority of everyone that we've had the privilege of having on the podcast all completely agree. And that leans itself towards education. If you don't understand how something works, how could you understand the potential consequences? And those that do understand, it's very difficult to communicate when someone else making a decision within an organization is saying, no, we're going to do it anyway because we might cut 10%. But of course, cutting that 10% comes with consequences, the regulatory issues that flow through, the lack of understanding, the loss of knowledge operationally across a company, the delayed view of knowledge loss over a period of time where you get customer dissatisfaction because while something may be plausible, especially within customer support, it doesn't necessarily mean it performs as well. And we've seen studies where AI has completely replaced human beings, and you begin to see a decline in customer happiness. You see a drop-off. Now, the time between implementation, yes, you get that immediate saving, but over a period of time, 12 months, 18 months, you begin to see the drop-off in customer retention, and then of course you have to spend a lot more on marketing to drive more customers. It's a false economy. We're now seeing enough time has passed where people are beginning to understand those issues. Hence 2026 is more about action, consideration, foresight.
So agentic AI has been, again, back to 25, massive leap in 25. You see that continued growth in 26?
Yeah, I think agentic AI is, again, it's very important because it allows for the ability to silo off areas which must be protected. It allows for scalability of subject matter expertise. It enables the connectivity of important utility and potentially other forms of AI. I think it is the opposite to the idea that everything goes into one place. I mean, you can imagine putting everything all into one huge pot and then everyone has to work from the same place with massive potential expenditure, but loss of security, loss of visibility, loss of trust. And as I say, you lose trust within an enterprise once, that can have quite dangerous ramifications. So I think the distributed architecture and the utility of what it could be, and not to say that all agentic technology is the same, because it's not. So again, the education element, I think, will play a really important role where an agentic architecture, and I'm sure there will be a vast amount of utility thereafter, connecting via the agentic methods will prove to be very, very useful and move the needle in many ways, both from the risk perspective and the opportunity perspective. Equally, it could be used and end up with some horror stories. But that's really where the knowledge, the expertise, leverage the good minds, leverage experience well, and understand, are we applying agentic AI to solve an actual business problem, or are we using agentic AI because it's the latest, coolest buzzword? If it's the latter, probably be fundamentally flawed. Everything should be, what problem are we trying to solve? What is the best tool for this? And I've seen on many occasions now, people using LLMs and pushing the agentic methodology simply because they think that's going to be better. And the POC, I think Sumitro had said it from IBM, the POC size and the productionized size, and this really does lend itself to the enterprise scale adoption of AI. You could start off with a POC and technically it solves a business problem. Everything about it could be great. Scale up to 100,000 customers using it, and suddenly you've got to fund something the size of a small country. It's not scalable. And then you effectively think, well, for 3% marginal gains, we've just increased our operational expenditure by 10%. That doesn't work. Again, it goes back to, well, what solution works? And these are the elements that need to be considered. And I think now there's enough stories out there for people to leverage, enough education is flowing through for people to make those decisions and say, that sounds great. However, we are now considering more things which certainly weren't there for consideration at the start of 2025.
I guess in many of those agentic implementations, there's a human still in the loop in terms of the key decisions, really. But we're surely, if we're not already, we're surely at a point where some of those systems are better than the human, really. What do you see? Do you see that different? Do you always see a human in the link as a really important implementation in business?
I think it is, because ultimately we live in a human world. Now, what function has technology since the dawn of time provided us? How has it served humanity? Why has it been created? And we're talking across the board. We could be talking from the steam engine to the invention of the wheel, through to artificial intelligence, through to mobile phone cell technology. It's about human beings at its core, right? So if you take humans out of the loop entirely, then it's relatively pointless, because at the end of everything, a human is ultimately a customer. Now, as far as rational decision making, what is the limitation of a human being compared to, let's say, technology, and specifically AI and the multitude of capabilities? It's usually to do with scale. Now, if I wanted you to read something and understand something and observe 100 locations simultaneously and pay attention to each one, that's out of the scale of what you're capable of, because as one individual, you're limited to the surroundings in which you inhabit. Now, if you've got an AI in a singular location to engage, to understand the nuances, the leveraging decades of experience to understand the emotion, the mood, the point and purpose, humans are far better, and I believe will be for a very long time to come. And ultimately, the human experience is something not to be overlooked. So in the context of enterprise, what makes a human interesting is that experience and their objective. Put a group of people together that all have different perspectives, you begin to enrich everything. Our limitations are scale. Now, if you can leverage fantastic decades of experience in complex circumstances and apply that, for example, in vision across CCTV cameras, to understand, and an example, something we've been looking at, behavioral detection officers, that type of experience and knowledge, to prevent terrorism, to prevent crime, to prevent bad things happening, by identifying and understanding the behaviors that lead to horrific consequences. But imagine AI could be doing that 10,000 times simultaneously to then communicate to real people to look at and go, I recognize that, I understand that, I agree with that, and we have the opportunity to safely intervene. That, I think, is a very, very rational and logical augmentation of the human in the loop capability. It's to do the things that our very makeup limits us from doing. So we have the best of humans and we have the best of the scalable technology. Understanding the world around us on a massive level and a granular level simultaneously, and enabling AI as a function to facilitate part of a chain of understanding a problem. But on an augmented approach, where absolutely a human in the loop, Paul Donger mentioned it as well. Most of our guests have mentioned it.
Yeah.
It is absolutely empirical. And even if we look at the age of this new AI world, it is very, very, very young. We have no real understanding of the long-term consequences of a lot of this. Even these decisions, which have been made in 2025, I mean, it's something I've heard recently. Again, there's probably statistics out there. Every prompt you put into something like a chat GPT is using the equivalent of a litre of water and God knows how much electricity. How much will that be when everyone is using it? We'll just be burning through a vast amount. But is there real utility for the majority of reasons? The AI slop, a lot of the things which really are inefficient and don't make sense and don't add value. If we could refine it down to what works, what is actually delivering value in the context of the business and the business functions, then I think those who adopt that methodology and leverage the best of human capability and augment that will win, and they will win in a very significant manner.
So I've heard you argue that before, really, such as AI should be an augmentation to humans rather than replace, really. But there's palpable fear across all industries at every level that AI is going to replace the job, really. So and it's probably it's probably no doubt that some roles are going to be taken by AI. But what do you think the chief people officer or the CEO of a mid-sized organization should be doing with their people to ensure that that human differentiator within their business remains in place and remains motivated and not fear of AI? What do you think? Is that training? Is that different people recruiting? What do you think about that?
I think it's a combination of things. First off, a lack of education often leads to fear. And when I say education, I'm talking about what problems can actually be solved. And in any walk of life, if there are things which are inefficient and undesirable to do and need to be done on scale and can be done better with AI, then that's logical, rational, and legitimate. If it is very much in the interest, in the enterprise and business world, of actually solving a problem and is cognizant of all parties involved. And I would always go back to the customer, because if you just want to cut the bottom line short term so that your quarterly accounts or accounting P&L looks a bit better, but you're going to alienate your customers, that does make sense. From a human perspective, you should be looking at what are your people capable of? How can they think? The value of humans. I mean, we were just having a little coffee with our last podcast guest, Ben Legg, the former COO of Google Europe. Having a chat, having a coffee, expressing ideas. When we started the conversation, why do I find it interesting to be in a studio producing music? with very different characters that are on the podcast as guests, with creative people, actors and directors, or with venture capitalists, VCs in Silicon Valley talking about things. The diversity of thought, the perspectives, the opinions, that's the value of people. To offer a different perspective, because even if we solve a load of problems, that's going to create problems. If AI takes everyone's jobs, which I don't believe it will as such, I think there will be a change, and it really comes down to, is your business a people business? Because the people businesses, I think, with an AI backlash from the irresponsible people that are literally just trying to cut costs and get away with what they can, there will be pockets of society that say, well, this is what we want from life, this is what we value, and we'll probably see a complete turnaround and change in the value of anything being sold only exists whilst there is a market for it. So everything being sold now may not be of interest to the people buying it in the future. And I think there probably will be more communities of smaller amounts of people. I agree with what Ben Leggett said about fractional work as well. The design of our lives will probably change. We will want to do different things, but I think people want to work. They want to be challenged. They want to be creative. It's easy to say AI is just going to take everyone's jobs, but really people will make their own futures, and they will be enabled to have the lives that they're interested in by outthinking those who don't think enough.
Do you think during 26 we'll see a lot of that? We'll see a lot of people being displaced, or do you think it's too early in the evolution of AI, really?
I think there's a change, there's a perpetual change, but there's been a change for a long time. This is a very visible change. And I think it's very easy to conflate and confuse the utility of the various forms of AI with the public narrative. The public narrative tends to be a regurgitation of the narrative of a handful of companies, right? And those companies are not even equal. They're not in the same business. So on a very negative side, a big backlash and big problems will be those who are very heavily into investing into scaling AI with massive data centers, the world becoming tokenized and the value is in the tokens. I think that's completely disregarding a huge amount of what makes us human and all the other AI. So we're going to move from the idea of AI being fantastic to the reality of AI delivering. That will create a shift. That will create a big change, because people will want to see results. They will want to see utility. They will want to see efficiency. They will want to see trust. I think that moves us from a mass infrastructure world into a private, real-time, controlled world. And think of this. If at the moment all information is going out to these big data centers, the primary companies that are trying to control both the public narrative with the social media apps, technologies, platforms, that data flows out there, and you're really not a participant of it. You are the customer to everything, so to speak. And your compute is distributed. Of course, that's highly inefficient. As AI evolves and becomes really powerful and specific as opposed to generalized, then the compute will happen on your own device. Then your data is controlled by you. You will still participate in other parts of the wider world, but you'll take control back. So the value that you will hold on AI as the education level rises, you'll realize, hold on, you do have options. You can take more control. You can collaborate in your own communities. Businesses will connect directly with customers. AI will obviously be instilled in part of it, but it becomes far more ethical, far more controlled by the individual, by the customer, by the business, and almost there'll be a nationalization. So the idea that it is entirely possible to have your own national, local, personal domain to leverage the upside for utility, for function, and on a scalable basis is actually in your control. That's not been part of the narrative for a while, because the new narrative is choice. What does every human being really want? And again, if you're looking at where is business going to go, where is the value in business, a business must understand its customer. And everyone knows customers have choice. And if they find out they get a better choice and it matches with their values, then they're likely to eventually create a relationship with those that hold the same value proposition as them. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot of change.
So that's edge technology, I think you're
Yeah,
talking about.
on the edge.
Yeah, on the edge. Yeah. Do you see that as a trend in 2026? Do you see that as a growing trend in business?
Yeah, because I think businesses, and again, my experience from speaking to a lot of business leaders, they value that. They're realizing the risks that have come about. There have been parts of countries that have locked down and banned some of these very, very major players. The private individuals, and especially businesses, are realizing their most valuable asset is their data.
Yeah.
And if they listen to the narrative of how things have gone to this point, they would have been giving their data away. They will not give their data away. Their data is the lifeblood of their business. So that means they have to look at local, private. They have to look at these things. But the bonus of the upside is that distributed technology, the distributed approach, and the private and the control approach also brings into play the idea of real time. So actually the functionality, the capability goes through the roof when you realize this is actually a choice. And I think controlling your own information, and when I say your own information, it's proprietary information, but also your customer information, which of course you don't want leaked out. There's huge risk to that. So it's inevitable that the way things are going to go, because the people that have the budgets, the people that are making the decisions, are the ones that are going to make ultimately the most sensible decisions in the interest of how they're measured, which is the success of their own business.
You mentioned data, really, and stating the obvious, data is the absolute currency for AI, really, and within business as well, really. We just move on to your business for a while, specifically the LGM, the large geotemporal model, and explain why it's important, you think, that businesses need to know about where and when about their data. Why is that important? And what are those business advantages that geotemporal model can bring, really?
Well, we're moving away from AI in the context of static data. Get a load of data, you put it into a model, you train the model ends up in a certain place. All utility of that model is therefore subject to historical data. It is not fluid, it is not live, it is not observing what is going on. It's perpetually out of date from the moment it's created. Otherwise, you have to go back. That's a very expensive process. The LGM considers time and space, it's highly efficient, and it understands everything in real time. Because the reality of the world that we live in, everything is fluid. Time, the arrow of time perpetually moves forward. We're always in the now, and we're creating a record constantly of what has happened. Within history, and again, context is at the core of this, within history or everything that has passed before us, are probable patterns or information and data which, if described in time and space, unveil patterns which show you what's going to happen. The context of what good looks like, what bad looks like. The idea of generalized, there's massive amounts of data, seems logical, massive amounts of expense when the context of what you're interested in is a micro amount of that. So why not be highly specific, highly trusted, verifiable sources of data, protect your own data, and do so in a fluid manner, whereas the data flows through, you put your own context of interest. You're in 5 cities, then you observe the 5 cities. You may want to observe what other cities can be described in the same population, the same age group, the same socioeconomic profile, so to speak. Are there other places perhaps you're not aware of where you could market to, and actually there's a customer base you weren't even aware of that meet the profile of what you're looking for? It's very well known, all the bad things that can happen in the world. The concept of risk, the concept of resilience. Resilience is simply having accounted for all of the risks. We have an issue as humans that it could take 3 months to do a comprehensive report on one location. This technology allows tens of thousands of locations to have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of considerations with millions, if not billions, of outcomes in a fluid real-time basis, because everything is perpetually subject to change. I mean, today it was snowing, then it was sunny. Depending which minute, which hour, where you are, of course, the difference between Sao Paulo, Newcastle, Geneva, Los Angeles, they all exist in the same time, but one may be day, one may be night, one may be summer, one may be winter. Where is our interest, and how does that filter through to observe everything in scale? So, we spent a decade understanding the complex problems of how to describe the world in which we live, and apply that for business and enterprise to enable a high degree of accuracy on a massive amount of scale, but specifically context driven to deliver extreme efficiency and move the needle and get fantastic results, augmented by humans, because humans drive the context. The human in the loop is the actionable element in this.
Okay. If you were advising a CEO now, you're in a boardroom of executives, a medium-sized firm, beginning of the year 2026. What are the 3 things you'd be advising that executive team to look out for, be aware of, to invest in? Don't do this, do that. Whether that's AI, whether it's people, what 3 things would you advise them to do?
Learn what they can about technologies like the LGM. Understand the value of geotemporal AI. Understand the value of applying subject matter expertise, their own data, expert data, through agentic GraphRag based AI. Understand the importance and the evolution of advanced vision based AI, visual and vision. So if you can see, you can understand. The domain of the word, language has been very well explored. That is only a portion of how humans comprehend sound, and especially vision. We make decisions. We can look at someone, we can understand a lot about them. We can look at a situation. The idea that a picture paints 1,000 words. The evolution of vision and visual based AI is going to be absolutely dramatic in 2026. That is an untapped superpower, which, if understood, and in the context of a trusted and truth-based, highly efficient AI infrastructure, which can augment human capabilities, I think will be super powerful. And thirdly, those two elements are the absolute necessities for 2027 and beyond, which will be robotic. Because a robot and robotic automation, that's when we're looking at like the manufacturing, the industrial revolution, that element, and incredible utility beyond there. That's, if people are talking about AI taking my job, they should be more concerned about the robotic element. But of course, the augmented capability of the physical world in which we live, that will be AI interacting, augmenting effectively what we want as humans. That's going to be the next stage to come. But I think anyone in business and in enterprise that can really figure out how to learn what truly is there, what is on offer, and what is coming, and can focus on what business decisions do you need to make? What problems do you really have? To step out their box, create a team of people who think very differently and apply those fundamental layers of AI, I think will take a massive, massive step forward, well over and above and beyond those who put all of their eggs in the LLM basket.
Okay, Graeme, to end really, we asked the GAEA Talks community for some rapid fire questions, and we chose 5 out really. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
So again, these are short, punchy responses from you really. So the first one is buy versus build. So for instance, for a mid-market CEO today, buy an off-the-shelf AI solution or build a proprietary model?
Mid-level buy, very large enterprise, buy, build, and augment.
Okay. I'm not sure that was quick, but that's as good as we're going to get. The new executive, what is the new role every C-suite will need in 26? Is that chief AI officer, head of human AI, or something else really? What's the one leader?
I would call it a chief artificial intelligence augmentation officer.
Okay.
Because I think it's really about understanding AI, understanding the business, and understanding people, and critically understanding the relationship from your staff and also from your customers and your suppliers, of how all of that interplays to really create fantastic outcomes.
That sounds like a new opportunity for some people to retrain us, those people. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay. The overrated metric. What is one AI metric that leaders track today that is actually a vanity metric, in your opinion?
I think test scores on LLMs, they seem, if you write the test and you're just trying to pass a test, then you end up like a lot of the education system. The key is really observation of the world in which we live and cause and effect. Anything which is purely test-based, I think, is fundamentally flawed and is a false sense of security.
Okay, one we've touched upon previously, but we'll read it out, is the black box risk. In one sentence, what is the biggest danger of a company relying on an unauditable AI model?
Oh, they have no control. and they have lost the fundamental right to trust, especially if it's purely API based.
And finally, for this session, will 26 produce the first AI run unicorn business?
Well, I think the value of humans, even if it's majority AI run, if there's no human involved, that would indicate there's no beneficiary. So I in the specific empirical sense of what you're talking about, no.
Graeme, we hope on the next episode you're back in your chair. But for now, thank you very much.
Lovely. Appreciate it.